In this video, we're going to key out the rest of the poses and learn a new method I highly recommend using that is used in traditional animation. My biggest passion in life is helping and teaching others everything I know about animation, while learning to become a better animator myself. YouTube is a great way to share that passion, but I don't get the opportunity to create videos for you as often as I would like. So if you'd like to support this channel to help me do more of what I love, please consider checking out my website where you can download the character we will be using for this tutorial. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. All right, so now let's go ahead and key in the rest of these positions. So another really important position that will really help define this run cycle is simply just going to the next position after he is in the air. Notice how we started on the air, and it's not kind of what we did like the walk cycle tutorial where he was, well, obviously because you don't walk in the air, but we didn't start with the contact position. This would be known as the contact position here, where the foot is making contact. And we didn't start with that position. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and select the target bone. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm just going to drag this down, straight down for now. And then going to the root bone, I'm just going to hold Shift and pull down that root bone till his foot is making contact. Now I want to make it contact that first line, not the second line. That is for the other foot. As you can see here, I just created that keyframe. However, I want to make sure that I'm creating a freeze pose on all of these poses. And again, you'll know why later. And we'll be deleting a lot of keyframes, but it's going to save me a lot of time. So I'm going to hit Control F to freeze my pose. Now the foot, it really doesn't do much in this position. It's gonna go up like it's gonna do by default. But what I want to do is I just want to lift that foot up just a little bit more. I can probably move it back just a little bit, but that's basically it. As far as the arms, I'm not going to do anything with the arms, and you'll see why, but basically all we're going to focus on from this tutorial forward until we start getting into the animation is I'm just going to be focusing on the legs. So I just want you to focus on the legs. Don't worry about the arms. I have a technique to basically make that whole process easier. We want to do the same thing for the other side, so I'm going to come here to our next pose, and I'm going to go ahead and go to the next. All right, so something that we're going to change here really quick that I just noticed is I was already separating out my keyframes as if we had already created the run cycle, but that's what you do after the timing. So keeping an eye on your template here, we're going to go to the pose where he's up in the air, and that's where we want to put this middle pose. So hopefully this doesn't make it too confusing. If it does, please let me know. But basically, we just want to create our simple poses right next to one another. And then when we get into the timing, which we'll get into a little bit later, that's when we'll be separating out these keyframes. So for now, just make a quick change. Again, let me know if this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to basically just bring those positions in. Okay, so I noticed that because my template was off, it wasn't following what the frame was. So we're back on frame 6. So this is the main pose, and now we're going to do this pose here. So now we're going to go to the opposite foot. I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to drag that down, drag down my root bone. And then again, the leg, it's going to be a little bit different from this first pose here. I'm going to have it pointed up, and then just maybe pull the hip back just a little bit there. Maybe point the toe a little bit higher. So I'll raise the target bone up just a little bit more. And I think that looks pretty good. So now you should see a little bit, not too much, but a little bit of a down of his body. You can see how far down it's going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control F to freeze all of these poses. And let's move on to the next one, which is going to be the furthest down position. So we have we'll call this air, contact, and then down. So let's go ahead and do the down position. So I'm going to just pull this root bone over to the middle. So now his weight in the center of gravity is going to be basically below his waist, his pelvis there. And we're going to pull this down. And as you can see there, it's going to the wrong one as I pull down the root bone. So let's go ahead and pull this target up. Again, we want to keep it on this line here. And that looks pretty good right about there. We're going to grab this target bone and move it over. And as you can see there, it's kind of tearing a little bit. But basically at this position here, his leg will kind of be centered of his hip or of his body there. So I'm just going to move that with the translate bone tool there. And again, that looks pretty good. Looking at our reference here, again, don't worry about where his arms are, but just looking at where his legs are And looking at that negative space between this silhouette, that looks pretty good. So one thing that I do that I think will be really good to get in the habit of doing is flipping through your keyframes. It's a traditional method that they did on paper when they'd flip through their sheets. They'd flip back and forth through their sheets to see how everything was flowing. And I suggest doing the same thing. So we have these 3 keyframes now. And as far as that foot and what it's doing, so far it looks pretty good. Ignore my little keystrokes on the side there. It gets a little crazy when I'm using my arrows. I don't know how to disable that. But basically that's the concept of flipping. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the next position on the other side. So his foot is going to be down. Go ahead and rotate his foot down. I'm going to bring down his body, pull that back up just a little bit. And again, I'm going to now have the leg so that it's following this silhouette here. So the leg is going to be above this line. And I might have moved the body down a little bit. But one thing that I want to keep in mind is because this is a cycle, if I have it too far down, then it's going to stutter on this second down position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my root bone. I'm going to go to the select bone translation, and I know it's this keyframe right here. I'm going to go ahead and take that keyframe, copy, and paste it. So now I have the exact same height there. And as you can see there, it doesn't look exact as far as the silhouette there, but it looks pretty close. And we'll be able to fix that as we go. So I'm just going to come in here and just kind of move his leg. All right, for the most part, that looks pretty good. So now we have almost all of our poses besides our push-off pose. So this is the last one. So I'm going to go back to frame 4. I'm going to drag the target bone behind his body slightly there. So it looks like he's going to be pushing off with that leg. I'm going to pull this root bone up. Again, I'm just going to make some adjustments with my bones here. I'm going to pull the foot so that it's now creating this launching position. And with this, I'm going to bring his hip forward just a little bit, about halfway there. I'm going to bring this hip back a little bit as well. So again, we're creating that negative space. It's a little bit wider there, the gap, but that looks fine for right now. Again, anything that looks off, we can go back and fix. Animation is just a lot of trial and error. But that looks pretty good as far as that pose. So I'm just going to take that keyframe there for the root bone for that positioning. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control C and then Control V so I can kind of get more or less where I want that, that position to be as far as the height. And again, I'm going to pull down this target bone and he's lifting off with this foot. I might turn on my onion skin so that I can see a little bit better the position of where things were before. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn on my onion skin and again select what that position was. And we're changing our legs now, but this leg is going to come back to basically the front of where it was before. So now after this position, it's going to fully extend out. And then I'm going to move this leg here back, making sure that it's on that other line there. So as you can see, there is again my reference, so you can see what that silhouette should look like more or less. And one thing that's very important that I forgot to do, as you can see, is I need to freeze all my keys. Again, we'll go back and we'll delete a lot of these keys, but it's better to delete than to miss them because then it just creates weird in-betweens once we have everything set up. So now again, just using my the method of flipping through, I'm just going to flip through. I'm looking at this back leg first just to make sure that everything looks pretty good. And I think it does. I'm looking at the hip as well. You can highlight the hip and you can kind of see where things are at as well. And I think that looks pretty good. Go to this next pose here. And I think that looks pretty good. And then we'll just go here. I think there's a little bit of distortion on that back leg, but it's going to be a really fast run and there's going to be some fast movement. But overall, I think that looks pretty good. So now the next part that we're going to go over is the timing and spacing. We're going to stretch out these keyframes. We're going to set up the timing and the spacing for our animation, and I'll see you there. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to upload your results to the Facebook groups. I would love to see your progress. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe.